at the end of the conference, we had Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, announce that he was making Bitcoin legal tender in the country. And so then that just kicked off the domination of Bitcoin in the like global conversation of money. You can ignore it when it's just some hobby, but when you have a sovereign nation using Bitcoin as legal tender, we're in a different ballgame now. So that event, we had like, let's say 12,000 people. The next year we had 26,000 people in Miami. Last year we were a little bit smaller, but we still had 15,000 people. It was a great event. And now this year we've moved it to Nashville, and we're working on some pretty crazy things. I can't reveal everything that we have cooking yet, but let's just say that if we play our cards right, 2024 will be a bigger, crazier event in terms of its impact on Bitcoin than Bukele announcing legal tender in El Salvador. We've got some big things in store. Yeah. So, it may not happen, but it's looking really likely that it may happen. We're really excited about it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of You're the Voice. I've got the biggest honor of sitting here with Brandon Green from BTC Inc., the Chief of Staff and Head of Events. Brandon, thanks for being with me.
It's an honor to be here.
All the way from the other side of the world, huh?
Yeah, sunny. It's actually now a little bit cloudy, Puerto Rico, but still beautiful, still warm.
Thanks for being with me. So just a quick intro for my audience that may not know you. So Brandon Green serves as the Chief of Staff to the CEO and Head of Events at BTC Inc., which is the company that is organizing all the most amazing Bitcoin conferences around the world. We'll talk about them later, and also the Bitcoin magazine. Brandon started as an intern in May 2017, directly out of college, and has been promoted up through the company, managing internal operations as well as media, ticket sales, and programming for the Bitcoin conference series. He now leads the conference arm of the business, and he serves also on the board of advisors for the University of Alabama. Wow.
Well tied.
That's a nice detail. Very nice. So you want to add a bit more about your background, about your journey, Brandon, how you got to Bitcoin and BTC, how you got to where you are today, what led you there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started out in chemical engineering at Alabama and knew nothing about Bitcoin. Was graduating college, planning to work for Anheuser-Busch to brew beer. And one of my last days in college, there was this fireside, and it was between David Bailey, who you've had on your show and is the CEO of our company, and this guy who was a writer for the New York Times. And it was a fireside about like how Trump had just been elected in the United States, right? We were fresh off of that. And I, being like a very progressive liberal person, it really affected my worldview, let's say, and made me question a lot of what I thought was real and true, and the trend of history and society, et cetera, et cetera. And so I found this conversation to be fascinating. Here's this guy who just like runs a startup media company about this Bitcoin thing, talking with the guy from the New York Times about like truth. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to tune into this. And I was ready to hear this New York Times guy just, oh, you guys have lost the plot. Like, we need these institutions to fact find. And it's so important to have the New York Times, and like, thank God for the New York Times. And I listened to him get absolutely dismantled by David Bailey around like, hey, your business model is dead. Media is dying. The future of media is decentralized. New voices are going to spring up. You guys have not been stewards of truth. Everything that you do is a slant, and you're involved in these hit pieces, and your job is to tear people down. And that's because you guys lack cohesion of your narrative and an understanding of the world around you, and so you're going to be replaced by people who have that. And I was like, holy cow, like this guy is on another level. And the thing is whereas I wanted everything from this New York Times guy to be true, in reality, everything that David was saying was demonstrably true.
With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce my sponsors. They help me fulfill my mission of spreading truth, freedom, and sovereignty. You're the Voice is brought to you by Trezor, the original Bitcoin hardware wallet company pioneering the development of self-custody for crypto assets since 2013, empowering individuals with an open-source device, enabling beginners and experts to easily and securely hold their coins. I find my Trezor super easy to use and recommend it to my friends and family. Enjoy my 5% discount on Trezor products by clicking the link in the show notes and using the code FLAT. Next up is Bitcoin Nashville. If you're like me, sick of the globalists and central banks robbing you blind through excessive money printing, you need to be at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. This July, the largest Bitcoin conference in the world will shed light on monetary freedom with a glimmer of hope among a darkening reality of centralized power and control. Top speakers and companies will gather in Nashville to take part in building a new reality. I'll be there too, speaking and interviewing. Head over to my link in the notes for a 10% discount using the code BTCIL.
And so it was like, okay, well, he's onto something. I need to go talk to him. And I basically had a free summer until I started brewing beer. And I was like, I don't know anything about Bitcoin. You want me to like move boxes for you or something and just help out around the office? I live in Nashville and this is where, the company was based. So I was like, just let me know. And he said, sure, come move boxes. We got work to do. And so I did. And so I started out at the company reorganizing the supply closet full of old magazines and cataloging, what we had there. And, kind of the rest is history. I put in my 2 weeks before I started with Anheuser-Busch and never looked back and have been in Bitcoin ever since. So, and learned quite a lot about it since then. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, it's been what, 7 years now? 8 years?
6+ years. We're on our 7th year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so much has happened in those 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy. It's been like, there will be a history of Bitcoin because Bitcoin is on this trajectory to, become the global currency. So there's a lot to learn about Bitcoin. Like once people start adopting it, they have to understand the history of it. They have to understand how it got to this point, what decisions were made, how governance was created, how the absence of governance was reconciled. And all of that happened since 2017, basically, with some of it being before then, but a lot of the major kind of things that happened have been since 2017. So yeah, we've gone through quite a bit. It's been a wild ride so far.
It has. And you are serving as the head of events as well in BTC Inc. And I think it has grown significantly in the past few years, right? You tell us a little bit about that. But apart from the Bitcoin magazine, BTC Inc. has Bitcoin Nashville now, which is coming up on July 25th, which used to be Miami, right? It was the biggest Bitcoin conference in the US and I think around the world, right? It was one of the biggest show.
Still is. Yeah,
Still is. Okay.
So it's the same conference. We've just moved it from Miami to Nashville this year, and
you had Amsterdam as well, and recently you did one in Hong Kong for the first time.
Exactly.
And I mean, I've heard amazing things about the previous shows in the US, and I'll be speaking there this year. And let me plug in that my audience can use my code for a discount if they want to come and meet me and hang out and see all these amazing speakers this year. But can you tell us a bit about the previous shows and the expansion to Hong Kong?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started the event series in 2019. And there was kind of a fundamental thesis, which was towards the end of 2018, kind of like I alluded to, there was this massive block war, fork war in Bitcoin, where there were different forks that were created that believed that Bitcoin should scale via on-chain big blocks. And to bore you with the details, that side lost. And so this different ideology or a different kind of path forward was what was adopted into Bitcoin, which was like, hey, let's do layered scaling. Let's keep the blockchain itself maximally decentralized, maximally censorship resistant, and then create tooling in order to allow people to anchor to the main chain and leverage its security without necessarily needing every single transaction to be on that main chain when they're using it around the world. And it was decided in 2017, 2018. And it left the community fractured because like this group forked off and they were trying to build this Bitcoin Cash thing and Bitcoin SV and all this other stuff. And especially those groups, this is an interesting tie-in, were in Asia. So the Chinese Bitcoin community especially was, I would say, kind of not dominated by, but certainly the main character, one of the main characters of the Chinese Bitcoin community was a guy named Jihan Wu, who was the creator of Bitmain. And Jihan, because he was a Bitcoin miner and he wanted to collect all the transaction fees on Bitcoin blocks, was like, let's make bigger Bitcoin blocks so I can get more transaction fees. I'm very much in this camp. And so it led much of the Asia and Chinese Bitcoin community to fork off of Bitcoin onto Bitcoin Cash. There had not really been a reconciling of all of that in Asia. But, in 2019, there hadn't been a reconciling in the US. And so we started this conference in 2019, and we had 2,000 people in San Francisco. The next year was going to be Bitcoin 2020. COVID hit. So we had to literally, we weren't allowed to do it. We had to, it's a long story, but we had a battle with the city of San Francisco, then we had a battle with the city of Los Angeles, and then finally we moved it to Miami, where the mayor, Mayor Suarez, was like, bring it on, let's do it. We were the first event back from COVID in the world, period. We were the first public event, and there was a really special sort of feeling around that, being, the first place where people were allowed to gather in person again and party and have fun and be together. And so that happened in 21. At the end of that conference, and this was a conference that I programmed and I did all the speakers and everything. And so, it holds a special place in my heart too. But at the end of the conference, we had Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, announce that he was making Bitcoin legal tender in the country. And so then that just kicked off the domination of Bitcoin in the global conversation of money. And, it's like you can ignore it when it's just some hobby, but when you have a sovereign nation using Bitcoin as legal tender, we're in a different ballgame now. So, that event, we had let's say 12,000 people. The next year, we had 26,000 people in Miami. Last year, we were a little bit smaller because the price had collapsed and we were at, 15K Bitcoin prices, 20K Bitcoin prices. And, half the industry had been wiped out through the bear market. But we still had 15,000 people. It was a great event. And now this year we've moved it to Nashville. And, we're working on some pretty crazy things. I can't reveal everything that we have cooking yet. But let's just say that if we play our cards right, 2024 will be a bigger, crazier event in terms of its impact on Bitcoin than Bukele announcing legal tender in El Salvador. So we've got some big things in store. Yeah. So, it may not happen, but it's looking really likely that it may happen. So, we're really excited about it. And yeah, as part of just the strategy in general, we were like, okay, well, what we did here in the US is we created this place where people can come talk about Bitcoin and they don't have to listen to other cryptos and what I would consider to be wastes of time. We're not anti the rest of crypto. We don't hate it. It's just it takes up too much air. People talk about it too much. And we needed to create a place where we could just talk about Bitcoin and leave all that other crap out of the conversation. This is not the place for it. And so That's always been the way that we viewed it. And that's what created this like special dynamic and atmosphere where you could truly come talk about Bitcoin and the ideas that underpin it without having to, every 5 steps, here's someone else's new coin that they're launching that they're trying to scam you with, right? So it's like an obvious concept in hindsight, but I'm telling you, no one had done this before when we did it, and so it's just like it's funny. So to your point earlier, we just this past month, and this is May, we launched the Bitcoin Asia event in Hong Kong, and that was the first time that the Asia and Chinese Bitcoin community had been gathered back together to talk about Bitcoin. Like, sure, there had been events around like crypto and blockchain and Web3 and all these other things that surround the Bitcoin conversation, but no one had gone there and cleared all that crap and just said, let's come talk about Bitcoin. And certainly no one had done it talking about Bitcoin BTC, like they were all talking about Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin SV or like these other forks. And so it was a really special event. It brought back together the Chinese Bitcoin market. And I think it's the start of something really incredible for the region. And, it may end up growing to be bigger than the US event. We'll see. But I think that like there's some energy there and there's a lot of growth in that region. And so I'm very bullish on it.
And, you spoke about maybe in 2024, we're going to see something bigger. I mean, in July, we're going to see something bigger than Bukele announcing El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender. I have my guess. I don't know what it is. I have my guess since the election is coming. And since last year you had Robert F. Kennedy. So, I can imagine, I can guess what it would be. And if it's what I'm thinking, it's going to be massive. Oh my God.
Yeah. So
okay.
Can neither confirm nor deny, but I will say that it is an election year and I expect Bitcoin to take a major role in how the candidates distinguish themselves from each other. So more to come.
So let's talk about that. It's part of my bigger question, but let's focus for a second just about the elections and where you think, what the influence of the elections on the Bitcoin market is going to be. And vice versa. What's the influence of Bitcoin on the elections going to be?
It's a $1 trillion question, I would say. I can tell you that in 2020, the crypto industry broadly voted 60-40 in favor of Biden in the election. And what we've seen over the past 4 years is the Biden administration become increasingly hostile towards the industry to the point where many companies have had to move out, go overseas. Ironically, the biggest scam of our entire industry, FTX, cozied right up with the administration and tried to guide a lot of their policymaking and decision making. And once they collapsed, it only emboldened the Biden administration to further prosecute and persecute the industry. And so I don't believe the industry is going to vote 60-40 in favor of Biden this election. And the thing is, this is paired with, let's say between 50 and 100 million Americans own Bitcoin today. It's hard to place that number, between Kraken and Coinbase. They said that they have 50 million American users owning Bitcoin. And, you factor in the ETFs and you got to think that, okay, that number is massively bigger. So not only is that number bigger, but the percentage of their net worth that Bitcoin is only increasing. I mean, today we're sitting at 71K Bitcoin prices. Tomorrow we could be sitting at 100K Bitcoin prices. If we hit 140K Bitcoin prices, which is very much in reason over the next few months, whatever percentage that it held, if they just do nothing, it's now doubled their percentage of their net worth. Okay, so we're talking about an asset that is quickly becoming a major portion of people's net worths. They're not going to vote for an administration that is hostile to their own pocketbook, that's trying to ban the very asset that they're trying to own and preserve their wealth through. And so because of that, I think it's very likely that these people are not going to be favorable to a hostile administration. And so the simple kind of statement is, um, would you like to oppose that? Would you like to maybe signal to the 100 million so Americans that own a lot of Bitcoin and want to see the number go up and adoption go up? Would you like to be aligned with them? And if so, that may deliver you the whole freaking elections. There have been conversations that have been going on, and those conversations have been, very positive, and there could be more to come. So, the only question then becomes like, what does it mean to be aligned? And it's a big question. Like, what does good policy in the United States look like for Bitcoin? Certainly protecting the mining industry, removing a lot of regulatory uncertainty and burden from exchanges and custodians and service providers and lightning wallets and privacy enhancements. All of that is super important if you want to keep the industry in the United States. And so trying to map out what that looks like from a executive branch level, let's say, is a very important conversation. So it's one that we're talking through right now, and there's a lot of opportunity out there to kind of craft really healthy policy and maybe make some headlines with it.
And this is happening while we're seeing tighter regulation forming around taking away privacy from users, and by locking up founders of companies, by by shutting down certain technologies, or just scaring off different companies that are doing business in the US, and all of a sudden they announce that they no longer are going to be serving US population because of the policies and the regulations. So do you think that the candidates, the presidential candidates, are aware and taking that to heart? Like, do you think they're actually going to try and win some votes by making promises around that to the Bitcoiners base?
I would say that it's a spectrum. So I think that certainly a goal will be to protect privacy rights. I mean, that's such a simple thing to advocate for when you're on our side of the conversation. Now, when you're up there and you get to kind of steer the car and control the policy apparatus, like, it's much harder to try and relinquish some of those controls that they have on the financial system. And so, in the spectrum of ways that we would want to see, progressive policy around Bitcoin, things like allowing Bitcoin mixers in the US, like, that's incredibly important, but it's not going to be where we start. It's not going to, we can't launch off with that, because that's going to take a little bit more conversation and understanding of what the goal is here. But ultimately, it's super important, because these people need to understand that the Bitcoin blockchain is transparent, and it's pseudonymous, but it's not anonymous. And if you have de-anonymization of wallets, that's dangerous for people. Like, people can track exactly how much money you have, exactly how you're holding it, and they can come after you, and they'll know whether or not they got every last stat from you. And so you don't want that. It's not healthy for a society. And so you need, like, better anonymity and better, privacy tools in order to protect users. So it's something that ultimately, like, I'm confident that we can push for. And I think it's going to be important for the use of Bitcoin to push for it. And, at Amsterdam last year, we heard Ed Snowden talk about, like, the importance of preserving privacy. And I fundamentally agree that democracy and freedom cannot exist without privacy. They are synonymous, because if you don't have the ability to have privacy, then you don't have the ability to protect yourself from majority opinion, when that majority opinion seeks to coerce you into agreement. So that's what I'll end on that with.
And I definitely recommend people to go watch the 30 minutes keynote of Ed Snowden in Amsterdam. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. This year he's talking again in Nashville.
He's talking in Nashville. So this will be the first time he's talked at the Bitcoin conference in the US since 2019. In 2019, he was one of our original headliners. And that was the place where he actually announced that he used Bitcoin to purchase the servers that he stored all of the NSA data on as he was whistleblowing that the NSA was spying on Americans. I mean, this is, if you want to talk about like issues and fundamental understandings of the world that like divide people, like one half understands this and one half doesn't. The Edward Snowden conversation is a fascinating one. Ignoring the intelligence apparatus that has a better understanding of what he leaked and what was the sensitive information and all that kind of what was the damage done by him going through the mechanism by which he whistleblew. The fact that he fundamentally made Americans understand that their own government was violating their fundamental rights, like the Bill of Rights, like the most fundamental rights that our Constitution guarantees to us. It was violating that and spying on us. That is such an important thing to explain to the population. And most of the people my age and younger don't even understand that that's what he did. He's just like some dude who got in trouble for leaking NSA documents. And so it's very much a thing where like one of the challenges of our generation is going to be enshrining the values of privacy and freedom and individualism and some of the fundamental tenets that just like democracy and humanism make up into the population once again, because otherwise you get this collectivist kind of mindset that kind of removes all agency from human beings and stifles freedoms and innovation. So it's important.
So the other influence that is very interesting is the introduction of ETFs and the massive inflows into this market. What's your take on that? Where do you think we're going to see that going? My suspicion is that through educating the market, the public that is a non-coiner, to join the Bitcoin game through ETFs, it's in an indirect or implicit way to control Bitcoin. Like, I know it cannot be controlled technologically, so I think what they're trying to do is get as many people who are interested on board an ETF rather than holding the actual asset and then controlling ETFs when they need to, whether it's going to be a proper rug pull or just dumping. What do you think? What's your take on the ETFs?
Yeah, so I have maybe a different take from a lot of people, but also I feel like if you hear me out, like my take is not that controversial. I think first and foremost that the ETFs are a great thing for Bitcoin because we're on the path to hyper-Bitcoinization, and hyper-Bitcoinization means every person in the world using Bitcoin in their everyday lives. That has to include financial institutions. Like, there is no path that we get to global complete adoption of Bitcoin where all of the major financial institutions in the world aren't touching it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so fundamentally, like, the ETF stepping stone was inevitable. It was going to happen. Otherwise, Bitcoin was going to fail. You had to be able to be adopted there. That being said, they will rug the ETFs 100%. It's going to be an attack vector. It's going to be a way to control Bitcoin. That's also inevitable. And, maybe they'll do it intentionally. Maybe they'll do it through government coercion. Maybe they'll do it through just sheer incompetence and like poor key management, and they lose a bunch of Bitcoin and they try and force a fork where they unlose that Bitcoin. Like, there's so many ways that they will likely rug Bitcoin. But the fact that you get like all of these financial institutions who are not Bitcoin native holding billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, tens of thousands of BTC, like, it's going to rug. It's inevitable in my mind. And the most interesting data point I have that maybe a lot of people don't have is I've talked to a lot of these ETFs, and I've talked to the ETFs in Hong Kong. And one of the things that was important for both the US ETFs and the Hong Kong ETFs is that the keys of those Bitcoin in those ETFs are in the jurisdiction of those countries. So the Hong Kong ETF was not happy with those ETF issuers having their keys be at Coinbase in the US. And what does that tell me? It's like, okay, well, Hong Kong wants all their ETF Bitcoin keys that they have, clearly marked and know exactly how much they own in their jurisdiction, that they can be at any point seized by courts or police or whatever. Gee, I wonder what they're protecting against, let's say. So it's very obvious to me. But all that being said, I think that the important onus on us is now to educate people, like, what is an ETF? How is that different from owning Bitcoin? What are the risks? Who are you trusting? What are you trusting them for? And ultimately, why is it better for you to hold your own keys and not just buy an ETF and be done with it? And that's not to say, there are some people out there, they're going to own the ETF and they're going to be happy. It's like the WEF image, like, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right? Like, they'll own a Bitcoin ETF and they'll be happy.
That's great. It is owning nothing and being happy.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have to accept that, like, some people just don't want the responsibility of owning keys. I get that. But those people are ultimately going to be at the whims of other people and other entities and other governments and, all the other risks that come with it. So that's my ultimate take. We're going to get rugged by them. It's going to cause carnage and chaos. It's inevitable. But from that, like, Bitcoin's going to wreck some of these institutions that try and rug it. And they will be just further, gravestones on Bitcoin's relentless march towards hyper-Bitcoinization. And it'll be a great story to tell. So that's my take.
I like your take. It's a very good take. And it's quite realistic. I think, so your hope or your vision is that we as the Bitcoin community should onboard as many of those ETF holders from holding ETFs to holding the actual coin.
Exactly.
And by that, maybe minimizing the damage and increasing the base of Bitcoiners.
Exactly. And, you have the added benefit of every single one of those financial institutions is going to be learning about Bitcoin. They're not just they're not just creating an ETF and moving on. Like, you are going to be seeping some of the natural sort of ideologies of Bitcoin into those institutions. And that'll be a net good, even though they will rug, and even though they're never going to authentically be a vehicle for Bitcoin adoption in the same way that, our decentralized movement is, they'll still be a net good for Bitcoin in the end.
And it's going to convert a lot of those people that work for those institutions, which is quite amazing in my eyes. I see it a little bit similar to, do you know of Edward Dowd? He's an ex-BlackRock analyst.
Gotcha.
He's quite a guy. You should follow him. And he probably would never call himself that, but in a way, a bit of a whistleblower, because what he did during COVID, when he saw everything that's happening around the States and around the world with the ongoing campaign of the injections, is that he took his skills from analyzing trends in financial markets and applied them to analyzing data related to the vaccines that were rolled out everywhere, and started to follow different adverse reactions and things like that. And he he pulled out of BlackRock, obviously. And this guy is serving good today. He's ringing the alarm. He's going to the Senate and giving testimonies and really trying to help humanity understand the damages and create awareness for people who are injured from the different types of products that big pharma put out there in the market. And so if people in the financial institutions are starting to learn Bitcoin more closely and understand the values of it, the properties of it, the vision, what it enables in the world. And by that, they take their skills and get out of the fiat financial system into the Bitcoin system. We need people like that. So
Yeah,
hopefully it will convert some of them, just like Ed Dowd, to become Bitcoiners. That would be fucking unreal.
100%. You know, one of my like
I spoke to
fringier.
Daniel Prince about it. Sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll just finish by saying I spoke to Daniel Prince about it the other day, and we both agreed on how much the Bitcoin community needs really smart people that come from the corporate world, the finance world, the economists, salespeople, marketeers, because we're one big company, right? We don't have that headquarters and that office and that CEO and that money that is flowing to get that company rolling. We have to do it all ourselves. So every talented person that is joining the team, that is joining the community, is actually serving the greater good, which is quite unreal.
Absolutely. You know, the one of my fringier takes, right, is so you look at U.S. percentages of like the overall market in terms of employment and GDP and all these things. And you look, let's just measure from 1971 to make it like very clean in terms of what I'm trying to say here. Before then, manufacturing was the lifeblood of the U.S. economy, and it was all about like building things and making things. And post 1971, but then especially it accelerated through the 90s, and then post Great Financial Crisis, there was a massive brain drain from all other industries into banking and financial institutions and the U.S. dollar industry, we'll call it. And that's because due to the Cantillon effect, like the best way to make money, the clearest signal that the market could tell you was position yourself near the money printer. And like, that's what our society values. And so it meant all the smartest people, all the Harvard grads, all these people, they all left college and went to work on Wall Street. And the reality is Wall Street moves money around. That's all they're doing. They're taking it from one place, they're putting it in another place. And those are all like jobs that exist because the US dollar is the global currency. And if you really wanted to reform the US economy and make the US like a powerhouse and a valuable ad for the world again, you crush the US dollar and you force people to go do productive things in society again. And in some ways, that could be one of the biggest benefits that Bitcoin brings is, hey, let's say that these ETFs rug. Let's say there's a massive economic financial crisis in Wall Street because Bitcoin's gotten so big and then it crashes, Wall Street. Force all of these brilliant people out of the financial world to go do something new. These are the most capable, smart, hardworking, brilliant minds, and they're all just moving money around. Go do something else. Go build something. Go be like productive to society. Go build rockets. Go get us to the moon. Go get us to Mars. Go build robotics. Figure out, how to create healthier pharma. Create better, spiritual experiences for people. Help them connect. Help people be happy. Help them be healthy. Like all of these things that we could be doing right now. And instead, all these brilliant people are working in money. And so, my final point on that is that right now there's an industry around Bitcoin. And it's amazing and it's needed. But my ultimate metric for Bitcoin success is when there is no Bitcoin industry, because Bitcoin doesn't need an industry. Bitcoin works. It's game theory. You can use it. You don't need permission to use it. You don't need a wrapper to use it. You can just use it every day. And there is no company that's required. And so the way I know Bitcoin has succeeded is when no one works on Bitcoin anymore, or, a few like core maintainers and people who are, but basically no one works on it, and everyone leaves the money industry and starts working on things that are productive to society again.
I'm waiting for that day. Okay.
Till then, we got to make sure this thing succeeds. So, there's a lot of work to do.
Yes, of course. Adoption and perception, Brendan. I'm speaking to you on both of your hats as a Bitcoiner, but also as a member of the board of advisors for the University of Alabama. We've seen recently the Ohio State Uni speech by Christopher Penn. Mm-hmm. He was booed completely when he started talking about Bitcoin. What's your take on this? Where do you think we're at the adoption and perception scale?
Yeah, so I would say that's more than anything like just a market indicator of where we were in that moment. Bitcoin was down a little bit. It had just hit all-time highs. It came back down. Like, people were sick of hearing about it. And I will say that he maybe framed it in the most conducive to be booed way possible. He was like, I know this is unpopular, but hear me out, and everyone's like ready to boo before they even know what he's going to say. They're like, okay, let's boo this guy. So like, I think that he brought that on himself a little bit. But that being said, like, there are plenty of people who are sick of hearing about Bitcoin from the lens of crypto. There are so many people who just get pitched Bitcoin's going up, and so is Dogecoin, and so is Solana, and so is Ethereum. Like, Bitcoin's cool, and now let me tell you about my shitcoin that I'm building over here, kind of thing. That is how most people interact with Bitcoin, and so many, like, fewer people began with the fundamental statement: our money is broken. Here's why. Here's how it affects you. Here's how it's changing the world around you. Okay, it seems hopeless. Like, this is a major issue with humanity and society around the world. The good news is there is a solution. Like, there is something being built, and it's happening before our eyes. And all you have to do is question, what would it look like if a global decentralized currency were being monetized in real time? Like, what would that look like? And then you kind of benchmark those things you'd be looking for and then compare them to Bitcoin. It's that simple. And if people can kind of do that in their own minds, many more of them will arrive at the, okay, maybe I shouldn't ignore Bitcoin standpoint. And sure, tons of them are going to find out that Bitcoin's gone up 150% in the past 3 months, and they're going to be like, okay, I guess I should buy some. And then they'll buy the top, and they'll get wrecked, and they'll be upset, and then they'll sell it all at the bottom, and then they'll wait and wait and wait, and then they'll start hearing about it again, and they'll be like, oh my God, it's up 3x from when I sold. Why did I sell? And then they'll buy again, and then this time they're going to learn a little bit about it, and this time they're going to be like, okay, what did I actually buy? And then this time it'll go up, another 2 or 3x from where they bought it, and they'll be like, okay, I really believe some of these things that it's telling me. Like, that's always going to be a natural way that people enter into Bitcoin. But, in the absence of that, our job is my job anyways, like, to get as many people to learn about, like, fundamentally why it's important and why it's different before, the market top happens, outside of the conversation of price, so that, it doesn't just become a roller coaster they get on, but a mission and a view and a lens of how the world works.
Gotcha. Okay. I wanted to ask you about stablecoins. So we've seen, I think it was this week, the former speaker, Paul Ryan. Do you know this guy? Mm-hmm. He commented on stablecoins. He basically was saying how they're good for boosting the US economy and the dollar. And your colleague, Mark Goodwin, the editor of Bitcoin Magazine, was discussing this too in his recent videos and articles with Whitney Webb that he did, how stablecoins could be the actual base for the new digital monetary system rather than CBDCs, and maybe it's just being used as a red herring. I wrote about it as well in Bitcoin Magazine. I believe it will be both CBDCs and stablecoins. I mean, stablecoins will have their role. I'm not sure exactly yet how they're going to frame it, but I'm interested in your take on it, because to me it looks like the institution is the sugar daddy of stablecoins, and I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. So how do you see that? What's your take on stablecoins?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try and take off my tinfoil hat as much as possible on them. What I will say is that if I were a government institution, especially one that is interested in spreading U.S. geopolitical influence abroad, I would be very pro any stablecoin that I can exert my influence over. So, what are these people like? What are stablecoins ultimately offering? Stablecoins are offering a U.S. bank account for people around the world that they don't have to
without having a bank account.
They don't have to have in their own name. Yeah, exactly. And those people have some level of increased privacy over their day-to-day transactions than a regular bank account holder would have. And that's basically it, And so it's like this agreement, this like unspoken agreement that we're going to allow people to circumvent the very like Bank Secrecy Act, like Patriot Act, like the very things that we put in place to surveil the entire world. We will allow these groups to operate outside of that regulatory environment because it's like fundamentally bringing US dollar adoption to new markets where those kind of censor or surveillance regimes like wouldn't be really worth installing in the first place. And then whatever happens, that allows for terrorist financing or major money laundering, or, if they start interacting with people we don't like, we can just freeze that transaction and not worry about it. Like that's the game they're playing. And so, I see that as like a very valuable arm for the government. And now, like, I want to maybe draw a distinction between the government and America, let's say, where America has ideals and ideas and beliefs about humanity and freedom, democracy, those kind of things. Yeah, like it's not maybe great for America because what it's great for is the American empire. And and I think that those two things are very much at odds with each other a lot of the time. And so, if I were to contrast that with Bitcoin, I would say like Bitcoin is actually a much better geopolitical tool for the US because our goal as a nation shouldn't be to spread US dollar adoption around the world. That's a strange goal to have. Our goal should be to spread like freedom, democracy, capitalism, individualism, the core tenets of American governance that has allowed us to create like so much wealth, so much good for humanity, so many great things that have come out of America. Like help that system of ideas and governance be adopted around the world, but don't be the single point of control over it. Like that's not the business that America should be in. And so Bitcoin allows that. Bitcoin is a decentralized tool that no one controls, but that also means that your adversaries don't control it. And that means that the governments or the populations that are adopting Bitcoin don't control it. And so it's a much freer, fairer, easier to maintain system that adopts the same ideals that ultimately Americans want to spread around the world. And so it's a much better vehicle in that way. So that would be my argument or my conversation around stablecoins. I think that they're ultimately in competition with Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that. It's going to be very interesting to see the number of stable coins that are going to be popping in the next year or two around the world. Israel is now working on one. I mean, there's a project for it, an official stable coin pegged to the shekel. Nigeria has a new one, NGN it's called. I think we're going to see more and more nation states experimenting with their own national stablecoin.
What's going to be funny or interesting to watch is I don't know how much you followed the stablecoin wars that have existed with the US dollar stablecoins, but it's not so easy to launch your own stablecoin and compete in a free market. Let's just take Tether, for example. So in the past quarter, Tether made, let's say, $4 billion off of just like their US, assuming that they're telling the truth, which, I don't even want to get into, but let's say that they made $4 billion in one quarter. That's $4 billion that they can use to attack other stablecoins. And so the simplest thing to do would be to go to, let's take Kraken, for example, okay? So Kraken is an exchange, and as an exchange, I'm pretty sure they have both a Bitcoin USDT, a Bitcoin USD, and a Bitcoin USDC pair, okay? So what they can ultimately do is they can take their dollars, they can buy Bitcoin in the USD pair, all right? They can then go to the USDC pair and sell the Bitcoin. Or I guess maybe they would do this in the USDT pair, but there's this whole mechanism where they can tank the price, which would strengthen Tether over here, which would incentivize market makers to stabilize the price. And the way that they stabilize the price is by selling into USDC and then go and deposit the USDC back with Circle and redeem the dollars. And so they can basically go get $4 billion worth of USDC and redeem it. And then they've removed $4 billion in market cap from USDC. And then they can just rinse and repeat. And so there have been, you can always kind of see, these games are being played all the time. And what's especially interesting is for Circle, at least until recently, there was a 0% charge on redemptions and minting of USDC. Whereas Tether, it's basically impossible, unless you're a condoned member of their minting and redemption process, you can't even be involved in the minting and redemption of Tether. And so they play these games where they will devalue Tether up to $4 billion because that's their profit that they made, where they can kind of absorb that devaluation, and then use that to go attack Circle and redeem money out of it and shrink it. And so that's why there aren't any other major stable coins in the US market, because all of them are little dogs. They can be eaten in one fell swoop by Tether at this point, if Tether chooses to attack them. So it's a fascinating dynamic. So, I don't know how easy it'll be for them to just do that to another stable coin, a shekel stable coin, but it's possible. It's possible they just go attack them and be like, we're not allowing that, get that out of here. So I don't know.
It feels to me almost like bringing the fiat war culture into the crypto space.
Yeah, it is. But just think about it on its face. It's a very easy and simple way to print money. It is on its face. It seems like such a amazing business model. Hey, I'll go open a bank account in your name without you have me knowing who you are, and I'll just hold treasuries and I'll just take the 5% annual yield on it, on all this money that you guys are depositing here. There should be thousands of stablecoin companies doing that. So why aren't there? It's because they're all battling with each other for supremacy in the actual crypto space. And Tether is ruthless in the way they go after all these other stablecoins. So fun fact.
Thank you for teaching me that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I botched the mechanism a little bit, but yeah, it's out there. You can go read about exactly how it works.
Super interesting. Brandon, should people who are not Bitcoiners yet come to Nashville and to your conferences in general? People who are no coiners, who are interested, who are curious. Some of my audience is like that.
Absolutely. The short of it is, first of all, the Bitcoin conference is fun. It's a good time. People are there partying. There's side events. We're in Nashville. Nashville is one of the most fun cities in the entire world. You got Broadway, live music, honky tonk bars, cowboy boots. It's fun. It's there's a reason we went to Nashville, and one of the main reasons is it is one of the most simple, fun towns you can go to, period. So have you ever been to Nashville?
Never.
Oh, you're
And I
gonna love
want
it.
cowboy boots.
Yeah, okay. We'll get you some for sure, and you'll love it. Like Nashville is so fun. So that's first and foremost. But then second of all, a lot of our audience every year is in that what we call like curious group. They're people who
Yep.
have heard about Bitcoin. They're not really sure much about it. They're wanting to come check it out, maybe learn a little bit of 101 content, see what all the hype's about. And I would say that that's anywhere from like 30 to 50% in a given year. And it correlates with like
Wow.
how big the market is in that year. So like 2022, 50% of our attendees were in that curious group that were
50,
just,
50?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I'm not saying like the curious group didn't own some Bitcoin, but it was like, they don't know, like, they don't know what Bitcoin is. They're just owning it because like they knew the numbers going up. And so like, that is a massive audience segment. And like, that's our goal, right? Like we want to teach people about Bitcoin. We want to take people, what I tell our team, our goal every year is to take every single person at our conference and take them one step further along their Bitcoin journey. So that's someone who has never heard about Bitcoin to understanding a little bit about Bitcoin. It's someone who understands a little to being like, okay, I can talk about this with my friends. It's someone who is the most advanced technical mind in Bitcoin, and they learn about something new in their own field. They get challenged on something. They learn about a new thing that's happening, in an adjacent, a Lightning developer learns about something on a layer 2, or a core developer, learns about this issue on, node infrastructure for Lightning, that, like all of that. We want to take every single person one step further along their Bitcoin journey. So, it's great for people who don't know anything about Bitcoin or only know a little bit.
Awesome. So I encourage people to come, and from the really impressive speakers list that you're seeing on the website, who are some of your favorites? Who do you think is going to give some really interesting talks or information this year?
That's a good question. So, I would put a few kind of threads of especially interesting information. Like call me an industry insider, all right? I know a lot about Bitcoin, right? So it's like, okay, well, what am I paying attention to? And it may be different from like, someone in your audience and what they would be interested in. So like, from my perspective, I'm very interested in a lot of the technical conversations around BitVM, which is this new kind of decentralized computer that can be built inside of like Bitcoin transaction knowledge and language. And you can potentially build permissionless sidechains and permissionless layer 2s outside of like the Lightning Network using this kind of on-chain computer called BitVM. And so like that is a fascinating technical advancement that was just figured out like in the past year-ish, maybe a little bit more than a year now. And there's so many people working on solutions around it. So I'm interested to see all of them. But I would say someone who is, just curious about like, well, what is Bitcoin? I mean, certainly Michael Saylor is a fascinating guy. He talks a lot about like how to view Bitcoin from the lens of investment and just, the community. Tim Draper is one of the original famous investors in Bitcoin, like one of the first investors outside of Bitcoin who was well known, who became a Bitcoiner. He's famous for buying the Silk Road coins from the US government. After they seized the Silk Road, they auctioned off a bunch of the coins, and Tim Draper was the one that bought them. And so, it was a big statement. He's been investing in Bitcoin companies for over a decade now, like well over a decade. So excited about him. We have Kathy Wood, who owns one of the bigger Bitcoin ETFs, ARK, and a couple more folks that are going to come in over the next couple months that will show up on that website and maybe create some headlines around it. So much more to come there too. So make sure you're plugged into that website. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. We're building this event in real time, and it's going to be massive. It's going to be crazy.
Oh, I can't wait. And I'm there too.
Of course. We cannot wait to have you.
It's going to be fun.
And do you know what you're going to be talking about yet?
Not yet. No, I'm actually thinking about different things and speaking to your team. It's going to be fun. I'm going to have, until I get there, I'm going to have my keynote at Prague as well about CBDCs versus Bitcoin. So
Awesome.
we'll see if I'm going to speak about that. Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe Noster as well. It's something that I'm really passionate about.
Absolutely.
Still tinkering with Noster. It's a very interesting development. It definitely has a great vision. For those who don't know, Noster is it's implicitly, I will say, it's a social network, but it's not really a social network. It's another protocol where you can develop things like social media networks that are already built in with payments into them, which is amazing. So like for people like me or content creators who have a profile on almost any social media platform, there is one called Noster where I cannot be censored because it's built on top of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin cannot be censored, which is amazing. So I can say whatever I want. There is a downside, though, that if I put something up there, it cannot be deleted. It cannot be edited. Maybe in the future that will change somehow. But at the moment, yeah, I got to be very careful with what I put up there. So
no, it's
it's super
absolutely
cool.
right. Noster's a fascinating development, continuing to be built, like truly a decentralized movement there. There is no leader. There is no like one person who is the definitive voice on what Noster is and what it isn't. So it's like, it's a very interesting experiment. And there's tons of great Bitcoiners that are fully building on Noster, fully, communicating on Noster, and it's a powerful tool.
If you're there and you want to follow me or follow Brandon, I'll put our Noster public keys in the show notes. I only have 500 followers on Noster, so I need more.
Get that number up. Let's go.
And I got to get that number up after the 92K on Twitter. I have to get to more impressive numbers on Noster.
Absolutely.
Brandon, do you want? I normally end with a message of hope for my audience. Where do you see us going, whether it's in the next few months or in the next few years? Where do you draw your hope from?
Yeah, I mean, I would draw my hope from people. I think that people can create systems, and those systems can be destructive and they can be constructive. I see Bitcoin, I see Noster, I see some of the things that are being built by our community as some of the most constructive systems that have been built in recent memory. And so you can never underestimate the capability of people and creating things that benefit us. So I'm actually very bullish on the next, let's say, 5 years, especially. I think that there is enough chaos. There is enough negative development that's happened over the past, 2 years, 4 years, etc. That like people are reacting to it, and those reactions, while some can go out of control, some can be bad reactions. The reactions are necessary, and there's going to be a lot of good systems and a lot of good ideas that are born out of those reactions. And thanks to what we're building, those ideas are not going to be censored. They're not going to be stopped. And I'll leave it with the old Ron Paul saying, which is, an idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army, any man. And we've got some fun ideas to work on.
Amen. Thank you so much, dear. Thanks so much for speaking with me, for educating me, for exchanging ideas. You guys don't know, but we had like a fascinating conversation about half an hour, 40 minutes before we started recording about where the world's going. So thank you so much for that, Brandon. It was really a pleasure to have you on.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you taking the time with me, and really value, the friendship that we've been able to kind of build since we met, a little less than a year ago. So what a period of time it's been, and it's been an honor to get to know you.
Same here. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Nashville.
Can't wait. We'll get you some cowboy boots.
you and your mom. I'm gonna see your mom as well.
She can't wait to. I'm excited to tell her that she'll need to host you and be ready to show you around.
I hope she watches this episode. Hey, Mom.
Yeah, hi, Mom. I'm sure she will.
All right, dear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.